It's been a tough year during the pandemic lockdowns for farmers and crofters across Scotland. They've been unable to meet up on farm visits and share knowledge. These visits provided a valuable opportunity for farmers to share best practice and offer ideas for improving business performance. Now, as the world has moved online, farmers and crofters the length and breadth of Scotland are opening their farm gates to share knowledge and information in a new and exciting way. Throughout 2021, FAS TV will be highlighting the changes farmers and crofters have made to their operation. Coming up on this episode of FAS TV, we highlight safety at calving time, look at lambing Ewe Hoggs, and feature best practice in handling pesticides. Physical health is easily neglected on the farm, and the same goes for mental health. But the consequences of ignoring your mental health can be the same or worse than neglecting your body. Retired farmer Bobby Stevenson lives in Ayrshire and has experienced mental health problems firsthand. While farming, he suffered from depression and now actively speaks on the subject to help others identify the warning signs.
I've been asked to give somebody potential pointers about depression, having been through it and come out the other side. I think it's a subject that's not greatly discussed, particularly among men, and definitely not in any great detail in the agricultural sector. If discussing it openly like this could help somebody else get through it, or prevent somebody from getting through it, I could quite happily do this all day. It is an illness. You can't see it. It's not like a broken leg.
There's support available for those who need it. The RSABI have a number of resources that can help, as well as a helpline you can call.
Before we were very much a grant-giving body, financial support, but my colleague Mags Granger, our welfare manager, called it a sticking plaster. It didn't really help, it didn't solve some of the underlying issues. So more and more we're offering practical and emotional support, and all three things together can often help people move on far more quickly and more effectively than only being able to offer one or two of these things. So by emotional and practical support, I mean, for example, if someone comes to us and they're saying they're under stress, we'll find out what's causing that stress, but at the same time helping with the stress by providing a third-party counsellor. But then if we find out what's going on behind the scenes, is it a family breakdown problem? Is it a debt issue? Is it falling out with a neighbour or something? And then try and tackle that as well. So the two things together, that emotional support and the practical support, quite with no money, can then break it down into bite-sized chunks. Each day something else is done and you move a step forward and a step on and a way out of the problem eventually. Sometimes there aren't any signs, that's important to note, but quite often there are. So for yourself, if you're not sleeping really very well, if you're feeling kind of consistently under stress or pressure, and you can't really see an end to that, if you're dreading getting up every day, if you're tired, if you're eating too much or sleeping too much, or the vice versa, eating too little and sleeping too little, if you're a bit irritable or angry, that they're often signs that perhaps something isn't going so well. And I don't know if I didn't know this either until I started work for RSABI, but stress and things can manifest itself physically. So bad backs and dodgy tummies and headaches and migraines can all be an indicator that perhaps everything isn't just tickety-boo.
The things I noticed looking back that I certainly didn't look at them as being signs of stress or potentially depression. I was fairly old school in the fact that I just wanted to, it was 100 units per acre that I sowed fertiliser, or 90 units an acre. My fertiliser spreader couldn't cope with that. I had to get it in kilograms a hectare, which I had to do a sum. And you would do the sum and you calculate on your phone. That's fine. What was the figure? You do it again. Right, put it in, and then you'd actually start sowing fertiliser and you'd look in the bar at the back, God, I'm not using enough, or I'm using far too much. You doubted yourself all the time. when you went to, particularly this time of year when you were taking cattle out of the house, and unless I wrote down the number of cattle that went out the trailer into that field, before I'd even left the field, I would come back to the field with the next load, and how many? Was it 12 or was it 14? Looking back, I would say these were definitely signs of stress. I mean, initially when I looked at it, I looked at it as a weakness, and I thought I'd failed. And in a way, I'd let the whole thing get that bad that I hadn't managed the situation early enough to stop myself getting to the stage I was at.
If you're feeling things aren't going quite right, or you're starting to notice some of those signs we talked about earlier, it's as I say, talking to a friend, a family friend or so on. But if it's a little bit more serious, it's picking up the phone to someone like RSABI, because it's confidential. No one needs to know about it. We tell no one. In fact, I don't know who we help, to be perfectly honest. It's just down to our welfare team. The other side, if it gets more serious, then it's a case of phoning the like of the Samaritans or Breathing Space, who are far more expert at dealing with crisis scenarios and situations. But quite often when you're in that situation, it's difficult to know what to do because just life is so overwhelming. And that's when you're relying on your contacts and your networks and the people that love you and the people that are keeping an eye out for you to reach out on your behalf and make a referral. And that's why it's so important to keep connected.
Looking back, what brings it home to me, when I initially went into hospital, the bed next to me was a farmer who took his life 2 summers ago. I definitely had these thoughts. It's baby steps, but always keep your eye on the bigger picture, the light at the end of the tunnel, because you will get there. Coming out the other side, it's like a breath of fresh air. I mean, people ask me how I said I'm living the dream, and I literally am living the dream. This life is for living. From where I was to where I am now is, I haven't a grasp of the English language to put that into words. It's living the dream is basically what I'm doing.
If you would like to speak to someone about the ideas in this segment or any other topic, you can contact the RSABI helpline on 0300 111 4166. The helpline is available every day of the year from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. At King's Arms in Ayrshire, farm manager Andrew is always looking for ways to improve efficiency and profitability. One area in particular where they've seen great improvements is in lambing ewe hogs. This is the benefit of increasing output and profitability whilst reducing carbon emissions.
We buy in Scotch mule gimmers, which then we put to the Texel, which gives us our Texel cross hogs. They keep them, as their first year as hogs, go to a Beltex, nice easy lambs, and don't need a terrible amount of milk to fill them up, so they suit the hogs really well. When I came here 26 years ago, we used to buy mule ewe lambs, and we lambed the mule ewe lambs and the Texel hogs. But we found to buy in mule ewe lambs, we were having to make an extended lambing period. So you were lambing for 9 weeks, and it just became that for staffing and everything else, it's far too long. So a decision was made to stop lambing hogs altogether, and we started buying in gimmers. So we did that for a good few years, which seemed to work. We cut our lambing time down to 6 weeks, which condensed it, allowed you not to be lambing and calving at the same time and try to go on with spring work. And then about 8 or 9 years ago, OPA reared its head. So we lost a good few ewes the first year with it, and when it came to stock numbers, to replace what we'd lost was going to come to far too much of a financial burden. So we decided to start lambing the Texel hogs again. Keep buying gimmers, mule gimmers, but we lamb the Texel hogs, so it just gave us a few more numbers. but they really only get about a turn and a half at the top, and then the tops are brought in at the same time as the ewes, so we're actually lambing the hogs at the end along with the ewes, so we're still at a 6-week lambing.
Ewe hogs should be selected for tupping based on their weights. They should be at least 60% of their mature weight at tupping.
We find the advantages are the fact that we're getting more lambs in the ground. Our hogs are fairly old compared with some folks because we lamb early. They're quite mature as hogs, as you probably can see in the shed. So we're working with something that's probably our hogs 75 kilos carrying a lamb. So she's fairly mature as a hog. And it just means that when they come to lamb them next year as gimmers, if a good 50% of them have lambed already, you tend to get more lambs in them and they're easier handled. They're great mothers as hogs, but a gimmer that's never had a lamb can tend to be a wee bit flighty and nervous. The only thing we do, they're scanned the same as everything else, housed as when they're scanned. The only thing we do differently, the minute they come in, they actually go into a bit of oats along with their silage, straight away, singles and twins. For you bringing them into a new environment, they've never saw silage before, they've probably never been fed before because we don't creep feed them. So you just tend to feed them straight away and get them settled down. And if they're still growing as well as the lamb's growing, so you're feeding them to grow as much as what you're feeding the lambs to grow. We shear the hogs in July, we find they grow better. We actually find we get a good bit more growth out of them. And because you're doing them in July, as you see in here, they've actually got quite a bit of wool on them. You wouldn't know, you wouldn't know they'd been shorn. It's not like true winter shearing where you would shear them in December going into the shed. And then they go back out in the spring with no cover at all. These girls have got a good bit of cover on them for going outside. So it just, if it became viable, your later lambs, you'd be probably better clipping them as well. They definitely grow better when you get the wool off them.
Lambing ewe hogs can not only increase production and profitability, it can also reduce the farm's carbon footprint. Carbon auditing is carried out annually at King's Arms. The carbon footprint of the flock has been consistently lower than the average of all early lambing flocks entered on AgriCalc.
For any farmers thinking about moving from lambing as gimmers to lambing as ewe hogs, what advice would you give them?
Be good to them. They're still growing. They're still growing as well as the lamb's growing inside them, so you have to make sure you have them in good body condition. We always tend to give our ewe lambs the best grass we've got up until tupping time, and then we don't flush at all. We try and negative flush, as in leave them where they are for the sake of holding their body condition and just trying to get one lamb in them. Doesn't seem to work. We always end up with half singles, half twins. But maybe that's down to the way they're bred as well. But if you can get a hog with a single, it's a lamb. You're not keeping her for an extra year, but you need to look after them. You have to remember that they're still growing as well as the lamb inside them.
If you would like help to carry out a carbon audit of your farm business, grant funding is available through the Farm Advisory Service. You can apply for this funding on the FAS website, fas.scot. For arable farmers across Scotland, handling and disposing of pesticides can be challenging and often requires suitable facilities. To minimise potential pollution at his farm in North Berwick, Stuart McNichol has improved facilities to try to minimise potential pollution. This has included constructing an impermeable washdown area. This area integrates a biobox into its design to filter out chemicals. The most recent development, still in the trial phase, is a closed-circuit transfer system. All three of these systems reduce the risks of spills, drips and splashes of pesticide and of inhalation of chemicals by the operator.
We got grant funding through the EAT scheme. There's a capital grant. We decided to put in spray pad. I went to other farms to see what they had constructed. we used a contractor that had put in a spray pad somewhere else. So this spray pad is angled two ways, one down to where I'm standing and also from where Sasha is on my left down, and it all goes into a sump, and then from the sump, when it's at a certain height, it'll pump up into the top of the bio box. The bio box is filled with straw and compost, and it's got a gravel bed inside as well, and then all the dirty water out the sump will then filter through these different levels to be collected in the bottom, and then in the bottom it'll be pumped into a holding tank. The clean water from going through the barrel bed will then be sprayed back out onto the fields.
The closed-circuit chemical transfer system is still in the trial stages, but reduces the risk of spills, drips and splashes of pesticides when adding to the spray. This helps to minimise potential water contamination and protects the farmer as well.
So this is a closed transfer system. The closed transfer system is basically to remove the contact between the chemical within a can. For demonstration purposes, this is water that's in here, and the exposure of those chemicals and active ingredients to the operator, the sprayer operator.
How has it improved your pesticide handling?
To improve the pesticide handling, it does mean I'm not coming into contact with what's within a can. I'm not smelling, I'm not inhaling any of that pesticide that's within a can.
Okay. What limitations do you feel it has?
Limitations at the moment is different can manufacturers do not have the right type of can lid. Yes, you can retrofit these can lids to the cans that are currently in the market, but not all cans are of the same size. So you get smaller cans with smaller openings. Those openings don't fit in this.
Stuart has thought about how he disposes of wastewater and has a bio-box. Bio-boxes are raised boxes filled with biomix material consisting of straw, soil and peat-free compost, and are designed to collect and treat pesticide residues.
So is there anything you would do differently about the design of this system?
I would certainly put a roof on it to keep the rainwater out.
Okay. And what impact does the rainwater have on your system?
It can fill up the tank fairly quickly. I think with the way regulations are going forward and for your own health, I think, and for the environment and for the water environment, you need to be able to catch chemicals that are potentially by accident spilt or something. So a system like this is just that defence between you and the natural environment. As a single operator, yes, I would certainly say it was an opportunity for me to get the funding there to put in something that will benefit me or benefit and safeguard any of my operators in the future. But also we need to engage more with the general public, and we're looking at farm tours. So I can't really have a sprayer sitting just on a pad of concrete. For a farm tour for the general public to understand, to try and see what farmers are doing to protect the environment, this is a great demonstration to them.
Lone working is becoming more and more common on farms. Safety of workers is a priority, particularly in the spring when cows are starting to calve. Come the springtime, many beef farmers will be welcoming new arrivals. It's easy to get caught up in the moment, and the pressure to get things done can lead to accidents. So it's important to have appropriate safety measures in place for handling of cattle. And safety is at the forefront of Richard's mind at Dusty Hall in Ayrshire.
I've certainly invested a substantial amount. Initially it was the cattle handling system. because I used to run the farm with my father, but he's just getting not as fit as he used to be. So when you were working away with the two of you, it wasn't so bad with the old system. It was slow, but you were still keeping relatively safe. But somebody had to be in beside the cattle and chasing them up a makeshift pen, if you like, whereas I thought it was time to invest in a proper handling system so you can work away yourself and everybody's safe. So that was fine, but then when it came to actually calving the cows, we invested in a couple of these calving gates, which 90% of the time you're not actually needing for calving, but they're quite handy to make an extra pen for a sick bay, for example. And also the calf catcher I invested in for, as the name says in the tin, catching the calves at just after birth, to tag the calves and keep you safe from the mother that could be breathing down your neck.
New mothers can be protective of their calves, so it's important that cows are restrained securely when assisting and helping calves to drink.
So here we have our calving pen. Should you have to intervene with the cows, you tend to need somewhere to work with them. So generally they're in the back of the pen, and if they're getting on with things, they calve away fine. But if you need to intervene, you can persuade them to come forward, generally with a bit of feeding. Even works when they're in the height of labour. So what we tend to do is put a bit of feeding at the front of the cow's head here, or the front of the yoke, and then you can go in the pen. This gate is a gate within a gate, and you try and encourage the cow into the pen, into the head yoke, which then, if she puts her head through, you can pull this rope here, and that'll catch her head in the yoke, and you can actually, I've got a wee chain here that I can tie around the gate to hold her in fairly tight. Should you have to investigate into the back end to see what the presentation of the calf is like, then you're at arm's length and at a safe distance to do so.
There are also added challenges to take into consideration when calving cattle at grass. Richard knows this firsthand.
Well, I invested in the calf catcher primarily for safety. 7 or 8 years ago I was tagging a newly calved heifer's calf, and you just invariably drive up with the quad bike, jump off thinking she's very quiet. You walk up to the calves trying to get it tagged, and she took a bit of a disliking to me and decided she was wanting to chase me, and I thought that was about a while ago, and I thought I was quite slight of foot, but it turned out she was a lot quicker than I was, and she got me upended and she trampled over my shoulder, and she tripped up on top of me, and I managed to get back to my feet quicker than she did and ran back to the old quad bike, which fortunately was still running, and I got down to the steading and thought, I'll need to do something about this, because life can be bad enough sometimes, but that was certainly going to shorten it more than it needed to. So then did a bit of research into how we could make things slightly safer. So invested in the calf catcher. So the idea of the calf catcher is you put it on the quad bike. It's a kind of offset design. So you're driving your quad bike here, which is the way up at the other farm at the moment. You drive past the calf, the newborn calf, and you can slide this gate up. Drive over the top of the calf, so the calf's inside. So you can gives you an area, a safe area to work within in the field, and then as long as you're fit and able enough, you can clamber over here to get in beside the calf. Ear tags and everything are in the box. You get your ear taggers out, tag the calf, and then there's a wee gate at the back of the calf catcher, which you can just lift up, push the calf out. Mother's now more interested in the calf than she is of you. You get back out onto the quad bike and away.
Richard's safety considerations don't end after calving. Safety is important at all times of the year, and he's installed several other tools to help with that.
In our day-to-day handling with the cattle, safety is obviously paramount, so we tend to bring the cattle into the cattle handling system. It's fairly self-explanatory. It's a series of pens that leads into a forcing gate at the bottom, so you can bring the gates all this way, and then when you get a set amount of cattle, say 10 or so, ready to come in, you can walk them down the handling pens, get to the end, and then we get to the end, and this gate will be open before we start. And you get the cattle into the end here. Get 10 or so cattle into the end, and then the great thing about this door, it's on a ratchet, so you can bring this element over, again for safety. So now our cattle are in the tub at the end of the race, and they can't go anywhere, so the only way they can really go is up the race, where we're needing to deal with them, whether we're administering fluke medication or worming or whatever. So you get a couple of cattle to go up the race, and then you manage to close these gates. So it's a non-return gate, so they can't go back and reverse into their friends. Same all the way up the race. You get one into the front here, and then when you want to, there's an inspection chamber in the back of the crush. So you open the gate behind the crush, and then open the gate for the crush to let one individual animal in. Then she goes in. It's a self-locking yoke, so the cow will come in, catch her head there, she can no longer return. If a beast is getting slightly agitated and upset, it'll tend to get a wee bit wild and start kicking and just generally acting fairly wild. So what you can tend to do is squeeze the crush down. If you limit the space for the animal to move around in, it tends to calm down anyway. So the beauty of this crush is it does squeeze down, so you can narrow it down. And then it's got inspection chambers everywhere on the crush, and if you have to catch its head, you can lift the head scoop up if you have to put an ear tag in, or clip its head for aesthetic purposes if you're going showing. So you've now got your cow in the crush, and depending on what you're happening to be actually doing, whether you're belly clipping or clipping their back or administering medication, you can get in. There's various doors that open on the crush to give you easy access all round. And the other important aspect, if you happen to have a serious calving and you've needed the vet to come along and you might have to do a caesarean, this bar, you can actually take this bar out of the crush. Therefore it opens up this side completely, so there's no limit to it for any access. Another aspect of the handling system is these posts to the side of the crush, which is to give you a kind of a protection area in case you do happen to have an animal that's gone slightly wild. The investment has benefited greatly in the day-to-day running of the farm. Everything just runs a lot smoother, and should the need arise to get a cow in from any corner of the farm, should she have a lame foot or should she need calved or anything, I can work away myself, get her in safely, and the only person that I need to involve other than myself is generally the vet, should he be required.
Remember, your safety at calving time should be your top priority. Don't put yourself at risk. For more information on any of our stories, go online to fas.scot.